I never thought I'd spend a Saturday morning watching my own front door through binoculars from a rental car parked 3 houses down. But there I was, 47 years old, sitting in a gray Kia Forte that smelled like someone else's fast food, watching a stranger carry what looked like my good kitchen chair out to a pickup truck in my driveway. My name is Ray Calloway. I work offshore petroleum operations for a contractor out of Houston, rotating 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, on a platform in the Gulf of Mexico. I've been doing it since I was 29. It's not glamorous, and it's not quiet, but it pays well, and it suits a particular kind of man. The kind who doesn't need much. The kind who can sit with his own thoughts for days at a stretch and not lose his mind. My ex-wife, Sandra, used to say I was more comfortable 300 miles out in open water than I ever was in our living room. She wasn't far off. After the divorce, I bought a small house in Pearland, a suburb south of Houston. 3 bedrooms, attached garage, decent backyard. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd owned it for 4 years by the time any of this happened. Most of the time when I was on rotation, the house sat empty. I had an HOA that handled lawn maintenance, a neighbor named Phil 2 doors down who had my number for emergencies, and a lockbox on the back gate with a code I'd given to exactly one person, my brother-in-law, Marcus, who had helped me install a water softener the year before and needed to get in to check on it once after I'd already left for rotation. That was supposed to be a one-time thing. The message came on a Tuesday, sometime in my first week back offshore. Phil texted me a photo. There was a white cargo van in my driveway, back doors open, and a man I didn't recognize carrying a box toward the front door. Phil's message said, "Didn't know you were doing any work done. Guy's been there since morning?" I stared at that photo for a long time on the platform's break room monitor. The man was maybe 30, wearing a gray sweatshirt, moving through my yard like he'd done it 100 times, like he belonged there. I wrote back, "I'm not. I don't know who that is." Phil called me within 60 seconds. He told me the van had arrived around 9 in the morning. The man had used a key to go in through the front door, not broken anything, no smashed windows. He'd been carrying things in, not out, at least initially. Phil had assumed I'd hired someone, a contractor maybe, or a handyman. He hadn't thought to call until he saw the van still there at noon and noticed a second man arrive. 2 men, my house, my key. I couldn't fly back mid-rotation without serious consequences to my contract. I wasn't able to just leave. I explained the situation to my supervisor and he was sympathetic but clear. I had another 9 days on the platform. Unless I had a verifiable family emergency. Leaving early meant jeopardizing my position with the contractor. I'd worked too long to throw that away without understanding what I was actually dealing with. So I called the Pearland police non-emergency line from 300 miles offshore. The officer I spoke with was patient but cautious. He explained to me what I already half expected to hear. If there was no sign of forced entry, if a person had used a key and was claiming permission to be there, it became complicated quickly. Without being present to verify the situation, without more documentation, there was limited action they could take beyond a wellness check. They'd send someone to knock. If the man claimed to have permission, there wasn't much to do on the spot. They did send someone. The officer knocked, spoke briefly to the man inside, and called me back. The man had said he was doing renovation work for the owner. He had a key. He seemed relaxed, not alarmed at all. The officer said he couldn't compel him to leave without more to go on. Renovation work. I hadn't hired anyone for anything. I spent the next 9 days doing my job on the water and going quietly insane in my bunk at night. I asked Phil to keep an eye out and text me anything he noticed. Over the following week, he sent me 6 more photos. Different vehicles in the driveway. What looked like a family unloading luggage one evening. The lights on in the back bedroom at 11 at night. Phil's messages went from curious to clearly uncomfortable. "Ray, I don't know what's going on over there, but it's a lot of people." By the time my rotation ended and the crew boat brought us back to shore, I had made a decision. I was not going straight home. I was going to handle this the right way. I took a rideshare from the terminal to a car rental place in Pasadena and got the cheapest car they had. I drove into my own neighborhood slowly, with my headlights off for the last block, and parked in front of a house that I knew had been empty for a month. The couple who lived there had moved to San Antonio for work. I sat there until dark. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary from the outside. The porch light was on. My truck, which I kept in the garage, was presumably still in there because the garage door was down. There were no vehicles in the driveway, which gave me some hope that whoever had been there was gone for the evening. I went around back through the side gate, using my own code on the lockbox. Everything looked normal from the back. I let myself in through the back door and stood in my kitchen for a moment with the lights off, just listening. The house felt occupied in a way I can't entirely put into words. There's something different about a house that's been lived in versus one that's been sitting empty. The air carries it somehow. There's a specific quality of stillness in a home that's just been recently used. I moved through the kitchen first. There were dishes in the rack that weren't mine. 2 mugs I'd never seen before, white with a blue stripe around the rim. My dish soap, which I kept behind the faucet, had been moved to the side of the sink. A sponge that wasn't mine sat in the holder. In the refrigerator, there was food I hadn't bought. A half-eaten rotisserie chicken in a store container. A 6-pack of beer. A brand I'd never drink. A plastic container of cut fruit. Someone had been shopping. Someone had been eating in my kitchen like it was theirs. I moved to the living room. The couch had been rearranged. It was subtle, maybe 3 feet from where I'd left it, angled slightly toward the television. There was a throw blanket folded over one arm that I didn't own. A phone charger plugged into the outlet near the coffee table, the cord coiled neatly. The plug left in the wall like someone planned on coming back for it. In the spare bedroom, the one I used primarily for storage, someone had pushed my boxes against the far wall and set up what I can only describe as a guest space. There was an air mattress, fully inflated, with sheets on it, and a pillow in a pillowcase. A small suitcase, the hard shell kind, sat open in the corner. There were clothes inside it, men's clothes, neatly folded. A toiletry bag on top. Someone was staying here. Actively staying here, mid-trip, suitcase open, like they fully intended to come back. In the second spare room, the same setup, but a different suitcase. Women's clothes this time. A pair of sandals lined up next to the door. 2 guests, in my house. At the same time, I went back to my own bedroom last. My bed had been made, tightly, in a way I never do it, hospital corners, a different pillow arrangement than I left. There was a small bottle of hand lotion on the nightstand, a travel-sized thing, brand I'd never used. Someone had been sleeping in my bed. Not the spare rooms, mine. I sat down on my own couch in the dark and breathed slowly for a couple of minutes. Then I drove to a Home Depot that was still open and spent $460 on security cameras. I checked into a Marriott near the highway and spent the rest of the night researching and setting up the cameras remotely via the app. The next morning, early, I went back to the house and installed them. I worked fast, moved quietly, and tried not to disturb anything. I placed one in the living room facing the front door, tucked behind a row of books on the shelf. One in the kitchen, wedged between the upper cabinet and the microwave hood. One in the hallway aimed toward both spare bedrooms. And the doorbell camera I mounted at the front, which would catch everyone coming and going with a face shot. I didn't change a thing. Left the food in the fridge, left the air mattress inflated, left the phone charger in the wall, locked up and drove back to the Marriott. At 2:14 inches the afternoon, my phone buzzed. Through the doorbell camera, I watched a couple, both somewhere in their mid-30s, walking up my front path, pulling rolling suitcases. The man held a piece of paper with what looked like handwritten instructions. He stopped at my front door, looked at the paper, then looked at a small metal lockbox I had never put on my door that someone had attached to the porch rail. He spun the dial, opened it, and pulled out a key. A lockbox on my porch rail. Someone had installed a lockbox on my own porch rail. I watched them go inside. I watched through the interior cameras as they moved through the house, exclaiming, "It seemed like," opening the blinds in the back bedroom, setting their suitcases down in the room that had previously held the women's clothes. That suitcase was now gone, which meant the previous guests had checked out, and these were new ones. Guests. People were checking into my house like it was a hotel. I sat in the Marriott and watched it happen on my phone screen, and my hands were shaking enough that I had to put the phone down on the bed. I opened my laptop and typed in my home address. I tried Airbnb first. Nothing. I tried Vrbo. Nothing. Then I tried Facebook Marketplace, searching for short-term rentals in Pearland. It took me about 4 minutes to find it. My house. Listed as a cozy 3-bedroom home in quiet Pearland neighborhood, perfect for work stays and family visits. The photos were professional quality. Someone had taken real estate-style wide-angle shots of my living room, my kitchen, my backyard. The listing had been up for 11 weeks. It had 22 reviews. The nightly rate was $175. For weekly stays, $950. I did the math fast in my head. 11 weeks. If they were booking even half the nights at that rate, that was thousands and thousands of dollars. Coming from my address, my furniture, my utilities, my house. I scrolled through the reviews. Clean and comfortable. Host was very responsive. Great location, close to the medical center. Easy check-in process. Code on the lockbox worked perfectly. One reviewer said the backyard was perfect for their dog and asked if they could book again in the spring. Their dog had been in my backyard. I screenshotted everything. Every photo, every review, every listing detail. I clicked on the seller profile. The name was Ray's Place Rentals. They had used my name. Whoever was doing this had created a rental business using my name as the brand. That detail hit differently than the rest of it. I didn't sleep much that night. I watched the camera feeds on and off until around midnight, when the lights in the second bedroom went off and the house went quiet. The next morning I watched the couple leave with their suitcases at 9:30, the man putting the key back in the lockbox on my porch. Around noon, a man arrived who wasn't a guest. He walked up to the front door, used a different key from a key ring, not the lockbox, and let himself in like he owned the place. He was tall, late 30s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt. He moved through the house with purpose, checking the rooms, straightening things, spraying something on the bathroom mirror, and wiping it down. He was cleaning, preparing the house for the next booking. He stayed for about 45 minutes. On his way out, he paused at the front door and typed something into his phone. A few seconds later, my own phone buzzed. A Facebook Marketplace message to a dummy account I'd created to watch the listing. A response to a question I'd sent the previous night, asking about availability. Hi, we have a great opening next weekend, Friday to Sunday. Private home, all to yourself, easy, self-check-in. Let me know if you'd like to book. I had his face on camera. I had his phone number from the message thread. His Facebook profile wasn't hard to find. His name was Donovan. He listed himself as a short-term rental property manager. His profile showed photos from what appeared to be multiple properties. He had a website, very basic, advertising, hands-free rental management, and maximized returns on your investment property. He wasn't squatting, he wasn't random. This was his job. I watched the feeds for 3 more days before I brought everything to the Pearland Police Department. I walked in with 2 weeks of camera footage, the complete Facebook Marketplace listing with all 22 reviews, screenshots of his profile, his website, the message exchange, and a written timeline of every guest I documented coming and going. The detective assigned to me, a calm and direct woman who'd been on property crime cases for years, went through my documentation methodically. She confirmed what I'd suspected from the moment I found the listing. This was organized fraud, theft of services, unauthorized use of real property, possibly identity theft given that he'd named the listing after me. Do you have any idea how he got access in the first place? She asked. I'd been thinking about that for days. The lockbox on the porch rail was relatively new. Someone had to have installed it while I was offshore. That meant someone had been inside my house, had a key, and had taken it upon themselves to create a secondary access point. The only person outside of myself who had ever had a code to my back gate lockbox was my former brother-in-law, Marcus. He'd helped me with the water softener over a year earlier. We hadn't spoken much since the divorce was finalized. I hadn't thought to ask for the code back because I hadn't thought it mattered. I asked the detective if she could look into whether Donovan had any connection to residential services, property maintenance, cleaning companies, anything that might explain the connection. 2 days later, she called me back. Donovan had previously worked as a site manager for a property services company. The company did routine inspections and maintenance visits for absentee homeowners and HOAs throughout the South Houston suburbs. He had left that company 8 months ago. But here was the part that mattered. My HOA had used that company the prior year for a series of routine exterior inspections. During one of those inspections, a worker had been on my property. On file with the HOA was a notation that a back gate code had been obtained from a homeowner contact for access. The homeowner contact they'd reached was listed as an emergency secondary contact I'd put down when I first joined the HOA. That contact was Marcus. Someone at that company, likely Donovan himself, or someone he'd coordinated with, had gotten my gate code from my brother-in-law under the guise of a legitimate inspection, and then never given it up. I thought about calling my brother-in-law. I didn't, not right away. Not because I was certain he was involved willingly, but because I genuinely didn't know. He'd always been careless with details, a man who confirmed things without thinking them through. He might have given that code out as a routine answer to what sounded like a routine question, or he might have known more than that. I sat with that uncertainty for a long time. The detectives' team moved quickly once they had the property services angle. They identified 3 other houses in Pearland and Missouri City that were being managed by Donovan through similar listings under different names. All of them belonged to people who were frequently away, military families, a nurse who did travel, contract work, a man who managed a manufacturing facility in Louisiana and rotated in and out like me. All of them had some prior connection to that property services company, either through their HOA or through direct service contracts. Donovan had built himself a small portfolio of other people's homes. The operation came apart on a Wednesday afternoon in late November. The detectives' team coordinated with officers to hit all 4 properties simultaneously. At my house, they arrived while Donovan was inside doing a changeover between guests. He was caught with a ring of keys, a tablet showing active booking calendars for all 4 properties, and a cash envelope that appeared to be payment he'd just collected from a guest checkout. I was parked down the street again, in the rental car, when they made the arrest. The detective had told me I could be present, with the understanding that I stayed back and let her team handle it. I watched from a distance as they walked him out in handcuffs. He didn't look panicked. He looked annoyed, the way someone looks when they've been caught doing something inconvenient rather than something wrong. That expression bothered me more than almost anything else about the whole situation. One of the other victims, the travel nurse, was a woman named Claire. We talked twice during the investigation. She told me she'd actually gotten a message through the rental platform from someone asking if they could extend their stay, a message meant for Donovan that had somehow routed to her real inbox through a glitch. She'd been confused and dismissed it as spam. Looking back, she said, she felt sick that she hadn't looked closer. I told her there was no reason she should have known what to look for. None of us did. The 4th victim, the Louisiana manufacturing manager, found out his home had been used for a week-long family reunion he never knew about. 43 reviews of his house across various platforms. His good guest towels, the ones his late mother had given him, were gone. Donovan was charged with fraud, unauthorized use of real property across 4 counts, identity fraud for the Ray's Place rentals, naming, and theft of services. The total estimated revenue from the operation was over $60,000. He had been running it for more than 7 months. What about the property services company? I asked the detective. What about whoever gave him those access codes in the first place? That piece was harder. The company itself had shuttered by the time the case built momentum. Donovan had indeed worked there and had, during his time as site manager, documented gate codes and access information in a way that wasn't technically illegal in the moment, but had clearly been used for personal gain after he left. The former owner of the company cooperated with investigators and provided records. 2 other former employees were interviewed. No criminal charges came from that angle, though the HOA that had contracted them faced civil questions about homeowner data protection. My brother-in-law called me 2 weeks after the arrest, after news of the case had apparently spread through enough shared contacts to reach him. He was shaken, genuinely, and said he had no idea. He said a man had called him once, identifying himself as an HOA contractor who needed the back gate code to check on a drainage issue. Marcus said he'd given it out without thinking, assumed it was routine, forgot about it entirely. I believe him. I also told him that if he'd thought to mention it to me at any point in the last year and a half, things might have gone differently. That conversation ended awkwardly, and we haven't spoken since. The trial happened the following spring. I testified for about 2 hours, walking the prosecutor through the camera footage, the Facebook listing, the timeline. Donovan's attorney argued that the properties had been used by legitimate guests who had no knowledge they were staying illegally, which was true, and that Donovan had been providing a service that, technically, some homeowners might have benefited from, had they consented. The judge was not interested in that framing. Donovan received 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay restitution to all 4 property owners. My share of the restitution covered most of my utility overage, the cost of changing every lock and keypad code in my house, the security camera system, and the lockbox removal. It did not cover the time I'd spent anxious and sleepless on an offshore platform, wondering what was happening inside my own home. That part wasn't on any invoice. I still live in that house. I didn't sell it, though I thought about it seriously for a while. It took several months before walking through the back door at the end of a rotation felt the way it used to feel. Quiet, mine, settled. For a long time after the arrest, I'd do a walkthrough every time I got home, checking the refrigerator for things that weren't mine, looking for phone chargers that didn't belong, checking the angle of the couch. My neighbor Phil started calling it my inspection tour and said it with enough gentleness that it didn't sting. Claire, the travel nurse, called me once about 6 months after the trial. She said she'd told the whole story to a patient during a long overnight shift, and the patient had told her she should write a book. We both laughed. Then she said she still checked her house on her phone camera 4 or 5 times a day when she was on contract. I said I understood completely. There are things I know now that I didn't before, and if any of them save someone else from this, it's worth saying them plainly. The first is this. If you travel for work, do not assume the people with access to your property are all trustworthy, simply because their employer is trustworthy. The company I hired through my HOA was legitimate. The man who used my information was not. Those are 2 different things, and the gap between them is where this kind of crime lives. The second is this. Audit who has access to your home. Not just keys, gate codes, lockbox combinations, keypad entries. If you gave your gate code to someone for a single task 2 years ago, they still have it. People don't forget codes the way they forget birthdays. Write down every person who has access to your property and review it once a year the way you'd review a subscription you don't remember signing up for. The third is this. Check the platforms. It took me 4 minutes to find my own house listed on Facebook Marketplace once I knew to look. Search your address on Airbnb, Vrbo, and Facebook. Do it right now if you haven't. The people doing this count on homeowners never thinking to look. The fourth is this. When something seems off, act on it immediately. Phil's text with that photo was the first signal, and I spent 9 days offshore, turning it over in my mind rather than starting the documentation process right then. I should have called the police non-emergency line the same day, started the paper trail, and asked Phil to photograph anything else he saw. Every day of delay was another day of footage I didn't have, and another booking that generated revenue for someone who was using my life as a commodity. The fifth, and this one I mean carefully, don't confront the situation alone. I am aware that everything in me wanted to drive to that house the day I landed and stand in my own kitchen and demand answers. I am aware that the rational, legal, documented approach felt slower and more frustrating than doing it myself. But Donovan had been operating for 7 months. He was calm when he was arrested. Men like that have contingencies, stories, lawyers on speed dial. If I had walked in and confronted him, I would have had 1 heated conversation and 0 documentation. He would have walked, and 4 other homeowners would have continued having strangers sleep in their beds while they were away working. The cameras were everything. The footage was the case. The patience was why he went to trial. The last thing I'll say is the one that took me the longest to put into words. There is a specific kind of violation in having your home used without your consent that doesn't fit neatly into legal categories. The prosecution can charge fraud and theft of services and unauthorized use of real property. Those are real, and they matter. But none of those charges capture the feeling of standing in your own kitchen at 2 a.m, looking at a coffee mug that isn't yours, and understanding that strangers have been sitting at your table, sleeping in your bed, using your hot water, living your quiet life while you were out earning the money that pays for it. My home wasn't an investment to me. It wasn't a revenue stream or an untapped asset. It was the place I came back to after 2 weeks on a steel platform in the Gulf of Mexico. It was the place where I knew where everything was, and nothing moved unless I moved it. That feeling of certainty, of a place being unambiguously yours, is something you don't fully recognize until someone takes it. It took time to get it back. Not the house. The feeling. But I did get it back. And if you find yourself in a situation like this one, you can too. Document everything, call the police, build the case, and let the system do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't always work perfectly, but this time it worked.